Okay, let's go.
After 50, the body no longer rewards force the way it once did. What once felt like discipline can quietly turn into strain because the biology has changed, even if the mindset has not. Muscles now repair more slowly, joints need longer to calm inflammation, and the nervous system becomes less tolerant of constant intensity. When exercise is pushed without enough recovery, the body does not get stronger. It becomes stressed, confused, and protective. This is the hidden truth few talk about. Movement remains essential after 50, but excess effort without respect for the body's new rhythm can slowly undermine the very health it is meant to preserve. There's a quiet belief many people carry into midlife that effort is always rewarded, that the body is a simple equation where more work produces more strength. After 50, that belief begins to drift away from biological reality. The body at this stage is not weaker, but it is more honest. It responds less to force and more to signals, especially the signals of stress and recovery. Exercise is still essential, but the way the body interprets exercise has changed. What once felt like progress through intensity now often registers as prolonged stress, and the difference between adaptation and breakdown becomes a matter of timing rather than motivation. From a scientific perspective, every workout is a controlled injury. Muscle fibers are stressed, connective tissues are strained, and the nervous system is activated to manage the load. Strength does not come from the workout itself, but from the recovery that follows. After 50, that recovery process slows, not dramatically, but meaningfully. Cellular repair mechanisms still function, yet they require more time and clearer conditions to do their work. When intense exercise is repeated too frequently, the body never fully completes the repair cycle. Instead of rebuilding stronger tissue, it maintains a low-level state of damage control, conserving energy and prioritizing survival over growth. Hormones play a central role here. With age, the balance between anabolic hormones that build tissue and catabolic hormones that break it down shifts subtly. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, tends to remain elevated longer after intense exertion. In younger bodies, cortisol rises and falls quickly, clearing the way for repair and adaptation. In older bodies, it lingers. When workouts are stacked without sufficient rest, cortisol becomes a constant background signal. This suppresses muscle repair, weakens immune response, and interferes with sleep, creating a loop where fatigue accumulates faster than strength. What makes this especially deceptive is that the early signs are easy to ignore. The body rarely announces over-exercising with sudden injury at first. It speaks quietly. Sleep becomes lighter. Morning stiffness lasts longer. Motivation dips even though discipline remains strong. These are not signs of aging itself, but signs of incomplete recovery. Science shows that chronic fatigue is often not the result of doing too little, but of doing too much without allowing the nervous system to reset. After 50, the nervous system becomes more sensitive to cumulative stress, and intense exercise counts as stress no matter how positive the intention. There is also a psychological dimension that often goes unnoticed. Many people use exercise after midlife as a way to hold on to identity, to resist time, to prove capability. This emotional weight can push intensity beyond what the body can process. The brain may interpret skipped workouts as loss, even when rest is what biology requires. Over time, this creates a disconnect where the mind demands more, while the body quietly withdraws cooperation. Reaction time slows, balance becomes less stable, and coordination subtly declines, not because movement is harmful, but because the nervous system is overloaded and unable to integrate signals efficiently. Muscle tissue itself tells an important story. Aging muscles retain the ability to grow and strengthen, but they become more selective about how they respond. They thrive on consistency, adequate protein, and sufficient rest. When overworked, they shift toward endurance survival mode, becoming resistant to growth signals. This is why many people train harder after 50, yet see diminishing returns. The issue is not effort, but the absence of recovery windows wide enough for adaptation to occur. Biology does not reward suffering. It rewards balance. Inflammation is another quiet factor. Intense exercise creates inflammation by design, but recovery allows that inflammation to resolve and signal repair. When workouts are too frequent, inflammation remains elevated. This low-grade, chronic inflammation affects joints, muscles, and even brain function. It increases pain sensitivity and slows healing, making the body feel older than it is. Many interpret this as inevitable decline, when in reality, it is a response to excessive stress layered on an aging system that simply requires more time to restore equilibrium. Perhaps the most important shift after 50 is understanding that strength is no longer built by pushing through discomfort, but by listening closely to it. Discomfort becomes information rather than an obstacle. Fatigue is not a weakness, but a message from systems that are asking for space to recover. Science supports this reframing. Longevity research consistently shows that sustainable movement, paired with adequate rest, preserves muscle, protects the nervous system, and supports metabolic health far better than relentless intensity. The body is not asking for less movement, but for smarter movement aligned with its changing internal rhythms. When this perspective changes, exercise transforms from a battle into a dialogue. The body becomes a partner rather than something to conquer. Over-exercising after 50 is rarely about ignorance or lack of discipline. It is about carrying a younger framework into an older biology. Once that mismatch is recognized, effort can be redirected rather than reduced, allowing movement to remain a source of vitality instead of quiet depletion. Inside the body, change does not announce itself with sudden failure. It unfolds gradually, at the level of cells, hormones, and signaling pathways that respond to stress long before pain or injury appears. After 50, the internal environment becomes more sensitive to repeated strain, and nowhere is this more evident than in the way muscles repair themselves. Muscle tissue still adapts, but the speed and efficiency of repair are no longer the same as they were decades earlier. This is not decline in the dramatic sense, but a recalibration, one that requires different inputs to produce the same outcome of strength and resilience. At the center of muscle recovery is protein synthesis, the process by which damaged muscle fibers are rebuilt stronger than before. With age, this process becomes less responsive to exercise alone. It requires sufficient rest, adequate nutrition, and lower background stress to function optimally. When intense workouts are layered too closely together, the signal to repair becomes muddled. Instead of a clear message to rebuild, the muscle receives competing signals to conserve energy and protect tissue. Science shows that in this state, the body prioritizes maintenance over growth, subtly shifting away from adaptation even when effort remains high. Stress hormones play a defining role in this shift. Cortisol is released during exercise to mobilize energy and manage inflammation, but it is meant to be temporary. In midlife, cortisol clearance slows, meaning it stays elevated longer after each workout. When exercise is excessive, cortisol stops acting as a short-term helper and becomes a long-term inhibitor. It interferes with protein synthesis, promotes muscle breakdown, and alters blood sugar regulation. This is why over-exercising after 50 can paradoxically lead to muscle loss rather than strength gain, even in individuals who train consistently. The nervous system amplifies this effect. Every workout activates the sympathetic nervous system, increasing alertness, heart rate, and muscle tension. In younger bodies, the parasympathetic system restores balance quickly. With age, this reset takes longer. When high-intensity exercise is repeated without sufficient recovery, the nervous system remains in a semi-activated state. This persistent arousal blunts muscle repair by disrupting sleep, impairing hormone release, and reducing the deep restorative phases the body depends on for tissue regeneration. What feels like dedication during the day becomes fragmentation at night, quietly undermining recovery. Another layer of complexity lies in mitochondrial function. Mitochondria are the energy-producing structures within muscle cells, and their health is essential for endurance, strength, and recovery. Exercise stimulates mitochondrial growth, but excessive intensity without rest can damage them faster than they regenerate. Aging muscles already experience a gradual decline in mitochondrial efficiency. When recovery is insufficient, this decline accelerates, leading to quicker fatigue, slower recovery between sessions, and a sense that energy is constantly limited despite consistent training. This internal imbalance often goes unnoticed because the body compensates. Other muscle fibers step in, movement patterns subtly change, and performance may initially hold steady. But compensation is not adaptation. It is a temporary solution that increases strain on tissues not designed to carry the extra load. Over time, this leads to overuse injuries, chronic tightness, and a feeling that the body is always on the edge of breakdown. These outcomes are often blamed on age, when they are more accurately responses to chronic physiological stress. Psychologically, the mismatch between effort and results can be deeply frustrating. People often respond by training harder, believing intensity is the missing ingredient. This reinforces the stress loop, pushing cortisol higher and recovery further out of reach. Science tells a different story. Muscle growth after 50 depends more on spacing, quality, and recovery than on volume. Fewer sessions done with intention and followed by adequate rest often produce better results than frequent high-intensity workouts. Inflammation adds another subtle layer. Exercise-induced inflammation is necessary for adaptation, but unresolved inflammation becomes a barrier to repair. Aging immune systems are slower to resolve inflammatory responses. When workouts are too frequent, inflammation remains elevated, interfering with insulin sensitivity, joint health, and muscle regeneration. This creates a state where the body is constantly managing damage rather than completing the cycle of repair and strengthening. What emerges from this understanding is a reframing of effort. After 50, the body responds best to clarity rather than pressure. Clear signals of challenge followed by clear signals of safety allow repair mechanisms to activate fully. Rest becomes an active biological process, not an absence of discipline. When recovery is honored, muscles regain their responsiveness, hormones rebalance, and energy systems stabilize. Overexercising does not fail because the body is incapable, but because the message being sent is too loud and too constant for the system to interpret productively. The joints tell a story that muscles often hide. Muscles can grow stronger, even when something underneath is slowly wearing down. But joints and connective tissues are less forgiving and far more honest about cumulative stress. After 50, these tissues change in subtle but important ways. Tendons, ligaments, and cartilage receive less direct blood flow than muscle, and with age that supply becomes even more limited. This means repair happens more slowly and requires longer periods of reduced stress. When exercise intensity or volume remains high, without adequate recovery, joints do not adapt upward. They adapt defensively. Connective tissue is designed to transmit force, not absorb endless repetition. Each movement places microscopic strain on tendons and ligaments, and in a balanced system, that strain triggers repair and reinforcement. After midlife, the signaling for this repair becomes quieter and slower. Collagen turnover declines, elasticity decreases, and hydration within the tissue changes. When these tissues are repeatedly stressed before repair is complete, they do not rebuild stronger. Instead, they stiffen. This stiffness is often mistaken for normal aging, when in reality it is a protective response to overload. Inflammation plays a central role in this process. Intense or repetitive exercise creates localized inflammation in joints, which is a normal and necessary part of adaptation. But aging immune systems resolve inflammation more slowly. When workouts are too frequent, inflammation remains present, shifting from a short-term repair signal into a chronic irritant. This low-grade inflammation sensitizes nerve endings around the joint, making discomfort more noticeable and movement feel less fluid. Pain becomes a signal not of damage alone, but of unresolved stress accumulating over time. Cartilage, the smooth tissue that cushions joints, is particularly vulnerable to this imbalance. It relies on movement to receive nutrients, but it does not regenerate easily. After 50, cartilage becomes thinner and less resilient to compressive forces. Overexercising increases joint loading without allowing enough time for cartilage to rehydrate and recover. The result is not immediate injury, but gradual wear that reduces shock absorption. The joint begins to feel noisy, stiff, or unstable, especially in the morning or after prolonged activity. Tendons tell a similar story. Tendinopathies often develop not from a single event, but from repeated stress without sufficient recovery. After midlife, tendon fibers lose some of their ability to realign and remodel efficiently. When high-intensity movements are repeated too often, small areas of degeneration form within the tendon. These areas reduce force transfer efficiency and increase injury risk. Many people interpret tendon pain as a sign they need to stretch or push through, when in fact, the tissue is asking for time and reduced load to reorganize. What makes joint stress after 50 particularly deceptive is that strength gains can mask damage. Muscles surrounding a joint may grow stronger, compensating for declining connective tissue resilience. This creates a false sense of stability. The joint moves under greater force without improved structural support. Over time, this imbalance increases wear on cartilage and ligaments. When pain finally appears, it often feels sudden, but the process has been unfolding quietly for years. Movement patterns also shift under chronic joint stress. The body instinctively avoids discomfort by altering how it moves. Small changes in gait, posture, or lifting mechanics redistribute load to other joints and tissues. This adaptation keeps activity possible in the short term, but it spreads stress throughout the system. Knee discomfort leads to hip strain. Hip strain leads to back tension, and what began as a localized issue becomes a whole body problem. Aging is often blamed, but the underlying cause is a chain reaction of compensation triggered by overuse. There is also a neurological component to joint health. Joint receptors provide the brain with information about position, pressure, and movement. Chronic inflammation and stiffness dull this feedback. Balance and coordination suffer as a result, increasing the risk of falls and missteps. Overexercising without recovery not only wears down tissue, but reduces the brain's ability to accurately sense the body in space. This is why excessive training can paradoxically make movement feel less controlled rather than more confident. The deeper lesson in joint health after 50 is that durability comes from respect, not resistance. Joints thrive on varied movement, moderate loading, and sufficient rest. They respond poorly to relentless repetition and intensity. Pain is not a sign of weakness, but of communication. When exercise honors the slower rhythm of connective tissue repair, joints remain functional and resilient for decades. When that rhythm is ignored, even well-intentioned movement can accelerate decline, turning exercise from a tool of preservation into a source of silent wear. The nervous system is often overlooked in conversations about exercise, yet it governs every movement, every adjustment, and every moment of recovery that follows. After 50, this system becomes more sensitive to cumulative stress, not because it is failing, but because it is carrying decades of adaptation. High-intensity exercise activates the sympathetic nervous system, sharpening focus, increasing heart rate, and preparing the body for effort. This response is useful and necessary, but it is meant to be temporary. When intense training occurs too frequently, the nervous system does not return fully to baseline. It remains partially activated, living in a state of readiness that slowly becomes exhaustion. This persistent activation changes how the body experiences movement. Muscles may feel tight even at rest. Breathing becomes shallower, and the sense of calm after exercise is replaced by restlessness. These are not psychological issues, but physiological signals of a nervous system struggling to downshift. Science shows that the parasympathetic system, responsible for repair, digestion, and restoration, requires uninterrupted periods of safety to function properly. After midlife, these periods must be longer and more consistent to counterbalance stress. Without them, recovery remains incomplete no matter how strong the muscles appear. Sleep is one of the first systems to suffer. Deep sleep is when the nervous system recalibrates and growth hormones are released, supporting tissue repair and metabolic balance. Excessive training raises baseline arousal levels, making it harder to enter and maintain deep sleep stages. Many people after 50 report waking frequently, feeling alert at night but tired during the day. This pattern is often attributed to aging, yet it frequently reflects nervous system overload. Without quality sleep, the body cannot coordinate repair, leaving exercise-induced stress unresolved. Motor control is another subtle casualty of chronic nervous system stress. Fine coordination depends on clear communication between the brain and muscles. When the nervous system is overstimulated, this communication becomes noisy. Movements lose precision, reaction time slow, and balance becomes less stable. The body may still feel strong, but it is less responsive. This increases the risk of falls, missteps, and awkward loading of joints. Over time, what began as a fitness routine can quietly undermine movement confidence. Emotional regulation is tied closely to nervous system state. Chronic sympathetic activation heightens irritability, anxiety, and mental fatigue. Exercise is often used to manage stress, but when intensity becomes excessive, it can add to the stress load rather than relieve it. After 50, the brain becomes more sensitive to this cumulative effect. The same workout that once cleared the mind may now leave it restless or depleted. This shift is not a failure of resilience, but a signal that the nervous system's threshold has changed. Hormonal rhythms are also influenced by nervous system balance. Persistent activation disrupts the natural timing of hormone release, including those involved in appetite, blood sugar control, and inflammation regulation. This can lead to cravings, energy crashes, and increased sensitivity to pain. Many people respond by training harder, believing discipline will restore control. In reality, this intensifies the imbalance, keeping the nervous system locked in a loop of activation without resolution. There is a quiet irony in this process. The harder one pushes to feel capable and strong, the more the nervous system learns to associate movement with threat rather than nourishment. Over time, this association reduces adaptability. The body becomes cautious, guarding movement instead of embracing it. Stiffness increases, breathing remains shallow, and the sense of ease that defines healthy movement fades. Strength without nervous system harmony becomes brittle, impressive in appearance, but fragile under stress. Recovery practices that calm the nervous system become essential after midlife. Gentle movement, slow breathing, and unstructured activity signal safety and allow the system to reset. These practices are often undervalued because they lack intensity, yet they restore the conditions necessary for strength to express itself fully. Science supports this integration. Longevity and performance research consistently show that nervous system recovery predicts resilience more reliably than training volume alone. The deeper truth is that the nervous system does not distinguish between physical and emotional stress. Excessive training adds to the total load the system must manage. After 50, capacity is still present, but it must be used wisely. When exercise respects nervous system limits, coordination improves, sleep deepens, and movement regains fluidity. When those limits are ignored, strength becomes disconnected from control, and effort slowly erodes the very stability it seeks to preserve. What science quietly reveals with age is not a warning against movement, but an invitation to a different kind of intelligence. After 50, the body does not ask for less effort, it asks for more awareness. The systems that create strength, endurance, and resilience are still present, but they no longer respond to force alone. They respond to rhythm, stress followed by recovery, challenge followed by safety. When this rhythm is respected, the body adapts with surprising grace. When it is ignored, effort turns inward, consuming resources meant for repair and longevity. Wisdom in movement begins with listening. Sensations that once could be overridden now carry important information. Fatigue is no longer something to conquer, but something to interpret. Soreness is not proof of effectiveness, but a measure of how well recovery is being managed. Biology supports this shift. Research on aging consistently shows that the ability to sense internal states, often called interoception, becomes a critical factor in long-term health. Those who respond to subtle signals rather than pushing past them preserve function longer and experience fewer injuries. Exercise after 50 becomes most powerful when it is intentional rather than relentless. Intensity still has a place, but it must be carefully spaced. The body needs clear contrasts between effort and rest to understand when to build and when to restore. Without this contrast, systems remain in a constant state of defense. Muscles tighten, inflammation lingers, and the nervous system stays alert. Over time, this reduces adaptability. Strength becomes difficult to access not because it is gone, but because the body no longer trusts the environment enough to express it fully. There is a psychological freedom in this reframing. Many people carry an unspoken fear that slowing down means giving up. Science suggests the opposite. Strategic rest preserves capacity. It allows energy to return, coordination to sharpen, and motivation to remain intact. Movement guided by respect often feels lighter, even when it is challenging. The effort becomes sustainable rather than draining. This sustainability is what allows physical ability to extend into later decades without collapse. The body's response to intelligent training is subtle but profound. Hormonal balance improves, supporting muscle maintenance and metabolic stability. Inflammation resolves more efficiently, protecting joints and connective tissues. Sleep deepens, giving the brain the opportunity to integrate learning and restore tissue. These outcomes do not come from intensity alone. They come from alignment between effort and recovery. When this alignment exists, exercise stops competing with health and begins reinforcing it. Aging does not remove the capacity for growth. It refines it. Muscles still strengthen, bones still respond to load, and the cardiovascular system still adapts. What changes is the margin for error. Excess effort without recovery narrows that margin, while thoughtful movement widens it. This is why some individuals appear to age well into later life, while others struggle despite similar routines. The difference is rarely genetics alone. It is the relationship they cultivate with stress. Compassion for the body becomes a form of discipline. Choosing rest when needed, adjusting intensity, and valuing consistency over extremes require restraint and self-awareness. These qualities are often overlooked in fitness culture, yet they are deeply aligned with human biology. The body is not designed to be dominated indefinitely. It is designed to cooperate when conditions feel supportive. After 50, cooperation becomes the foundation of performance. Movement guided by wisdom also reshapes identity. Exercise no longer serves as a battle against time, but as a conversation with it. Each session becomes an opportunity to reinforce trust between mind and body. This trust allows strength to express itself smoothly, balance to remain stable, and confidence to grow without tension. Over-exercising fractures. This trust, teaching the body to brace and protect. Intelligent training restores it, allowing movement to remain a source of vitality rather than strain. The deepest insight science offers is that longevity is not built through constant intensity, but through sustainable patterns that honor biological limits. After 50, these limits are not barriers, but guides. When they are followed, exercise becomes a lifelong ally rather than a short-term test of endurance. The body continues to adapt, not in defiance of age, but in harmony with it.